What's up, guys? Welcome back to The Question, where you have the questions and I have the answers, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Color Purple 2023. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. I try to upload new videos every single Wednesday. However, this will be the last video for a while as I'm going back to college this Sunday. And you guys know that once I'm there, I never upload because I just never have time to do it. If I do, I will, but don't hold your breath. So next video coming most likely late June. With that being said, let's get on to the video. Movie musicals have been a growing genre since Hamilton came out in 2020, though it's important to note that Hamilton is not actually a movie musical, it's just a high-quality professional tape of the musical itself. But since then, movie musicals have been oversaturating the market. We've seen more of them in the last 3 years, and I think we have in the last 10 prior to this, with releases such as West Side Story, In the Heights, Tick, Tick, Boom. Now we're getting Mean Girls, Dear Evan Hansen, The Prom, talks of Wicked Part 1 and 2, as well as a proposed movie for Little Shop of Horrors. And of course, Wonka is an original movie musical. And now we have The Color Purple. I bring this up because this oversaturation and high increase of movie musicals in mainstream media has begun a conversation between musical fans, film fans, and a combination of the two of what makes a good movie musical, what makes a good adaptation, because they're very different mediums and very different things are expected between a stage and a movie. And how do you combine them? What makes these things work? What doesn't make them work? And how can we reach a wider audience than just people who enjoyed the musical or people who like the actors in them? And while we have a lot of opinions and a lot of good examples of bad movie musicals like Dear Evan Hansen, we can't really agree on what a good movie musical is, because there's always a loud voice of dissent for everyone that has come out so far. West Side Story, people thought was beautiful. However, a lot of people didn't like how it made them feel. They didn't like how the conversation that the setting had with reality versus it being a musical, versus what the original adaptation had. Same thing with In the Heights, where Lin-Manuel Miranda, who also produced Tick, Tick, Boom, chose to lean in more into this fantasy and make all these dance sequences less realistic, because he does want to suspend the belief of the viewer, and he thinks that movies are harder to do that with because they are presented like real life more so than a stage is, because you can't see kind of where the universe ends, whereas with a stage you can, and so it's easier to imagine that these crazy shenanigans that happen in musicals can happen in real life. So he really leans into and uses the surrealism that musical theater invites to varying degrees of success. People really like Tick, Tick, Boom. People were less fond of In the Heights. So once again, I personally agree with his philosophy on that. However, I do think that it depends on the musical and how you go about it. I think a lot of people also just didn't like the major changes that were made to In the Heights, and that contributed to the overall dislike of the movie musical. So what does this have to do with The Color Purple? This is giving us the criteria of how I'm going to review it and what my opinions on it are and why. Because I personally think that this is a phenomenal example of a movie musical. And I am very frustrated that of all the movie musicals that have gotten so much advertisement and so much hype and so much conversation started around it, this one has the least. And I say that because this is coming out at the same time that Wonka is coming out and Mean Girls movie musical is coming out. And those two have garnered attention because they are very notably not advertised as musicals. They are advertised as just plain movies, and people are saying this is done because audiences don't want to see movie musicals for all the reasons that I said before. However, The Color Purple was and has been advertised as a movie musical. If you look at any of the trailers, you can see the singing, you can see the dancing, you can see the fun costuming and transitions. It has never hidden the fact that this is a movie musical. However, you see these advertisements a lot less than Mean Girls and Wonka, and you don't hear anybody really talking about this as much as the other two, which I think is a grand shame because it's probably going to be the best of all three of them. Now, for those of you who have seen The Color Purple or who have read it in its many other forms, it is also a regular musical. It is a movie and it is a book. Originally, it is a book by Alice Walker, who famously coined the word womanism, which is not just Black feminism, but it highlights women of color, as well as queer women, people who are notably left out of the feminist movement or who are pushed to the sidelines because of it. Womanism is supposed to be from this perspective and highlighting how they can achieve liberation, not just within like a white patriarchy, but also just within the white feminist movement as a whole, because the feminist movement does not always address women of color or queer women of color. And this includes trans women as well. And The Color Purple has notably been a very good illustration of what Alice Walker means as womanism, and also as a good example of Black liberation theology as well as womanist theology. That's the way that I was introduced to it. I had to watch the original movie adaptation, which came out in 1985. It's starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey, which is why Whoopi Goldberg makes a cameo in the movie musical. I was really excited to see that because she did such a good job. That is also a really good movie. There are a lot of content warnings though, rape, incest, violence, but it is a masterpiece of a film and a masterpiece of a story, and I do highly recommend that you watch it either before or after you see The Color Purple 2023. You should watch both of them, I think, just so you can appreciate each of them because they are just both beautiful. But I've watched it to illustrate womanist theology. And I think that this adaptation has done a very good job at maintaining this. I know that the original 2005 musical was not well received because people were very critical. When you take a very serious, darker tone story like The Color Purple and turn it into a musical, which we are apt to do, Parade, which is about the lynching of Leo Frank and the rise of anti-Semitism, that has been turned into a musical. And The Diary of Anne Frank has been turned into a musical. A lot of very serious, dark topics get turned into musicals, and that is a very interesting thing to think about because these are dark, serious topics, and musical theater tends to be very lighthearted, or at least associated with very lighthearted, fun camaraderie. And people in 2005 that this was very disrespectful to do. And so it was not very popular until the revival in 2015, and then it became popular enough that it was turned into this movie musical. And I will be honest, I was also worried after seeing the original movie that I was worried about that. I was worried about it being too lighthearted, too upbeat, too positive for such a serious and severe topic that it was talking about, but it balanced it really well. And I appreciate that, and that is part of why I love this so much, and I think that this works exceptionally well as a movie musical. Okay, to begin my actual critical review, the casting was phenomenal. The casting is what drew me in to watch the film, aside from the fact that I already knew the plot. The cast was incredible. Taraji P. Henson did amazing as Shug Avery. Fantasia reprised her role from her of Celie, who is the main character. This is all from Celie's perspective, and it follows her life as over the 38 years, almost 40 years of her life between the ages, I think, of 16 up to, I can do math, I'm gonna say like mid to late 50s or early 50s. yeah, early to late 50s. She's 50 something by the end of it. And her hardships, her life, but also the hardships in the life and joys of everybody surrounding her and her community, and how they come together as a community through their hardships, namely as women, as Black women specifically, who are subject to not only white people around them in the early 1900s, but also to the Black men around them, as well as each other Black women. But no, Fantasia reprised her role, which was phenomenal. I think the woman who's played Sophia also reprised her role from the original revival in 2015. And that's something I appreciate, is a lot of times in movie musicals, it's more about marketability versus actual good quality film and or musical adaptations. And so a lot of times they will give you really famous actors in movie musicals rather than people who can actually sing or dance to a Broadway level. And that diminishes the quality of this production. And I think that's part of what happened in Dear Evan Hansen, is that they hired a bunch of people who are not Broadway trained, who could not sing, and then they had to cut a bunch of songs because these people could not sing. And then you have a musical that barely has any songs, and now it has even less songs, and it's already a depressing film, and nobody wants to watch it. But all these people had phenomenal vocal range, phenomenal voices. Like, every single song just was the most beautiful thing you'd ever heard. It had so much heart and soul and passion and skill, and there was never any doubt that these people had the ability to do these things. All of the dancing, the choreography was amazing. The costuming was beautiful. And also the costuming was very good. I'm very critical of like historical costuming because we get it wrong a lot of the time, especially when we have to cover such a large time span of like 38 years. And so we start in 1909 and we end in 1947. And the costuming stays up to date and stays incredibly accurate, which I think is amazing. Another thing I liked about the casting is that it really celebrated, and the movie really celebrated, Black bodies and Black beauty. If you watch the 1985 film, one of the things that they talk about, both in the 85 film as well as 2023, is the concept of beauty, and beauty being something that is marketable, sellable, that can get you a better place in life. Basically, pretty privilege is what we would call it now. Because one of the big things about Celie is that she is ugly. Everybody says that she's really ugly. She's not. But compared to everybody else, she's ugly. And that gives them license to treat her that way because she has no other value, because she's not beautiful. But however, majority of the people that we see in the 85 film have very Western beauty standard, like bodies, hair, aside, even Celie to a degree, you know, aside from her face not being like white Western beauty standard or facial structure, she's very slim. And so is everybody else aside from Sophia, because that's supposed to be her character. She's very proud of herself, and she is very much like, has her own agency and is a large force that takes up space, in contrast to Celie. She is there to be kind of like the antithesis or a foil to Celie, which is why she's the only one who looks very different than everybody else. But everybody else looks like this westernized, kind of like slim, carefully groomed, like beauty standard. However, in the 2023 version, everybody has their natural hair. You know, we see, I'm not going to say afros, but just it's not straightened. They're not trying to fit into Western beauty standards, and they have a wide variety of shapes and sizes and bodies, and they're all celebrated and shown as beautiful. You know, they all take part in pleasure and dancing and happiness. They all do the choreographies. They're all great. And it's never the body that's shown to be ugly, it's facial features. But all body types are celebrated. There's a wide variety of skin tone and shade. Fantasia has a lot darker skin than Halle Bailey, who plays Nettie, the younger version of Nettie. And, you know, obviously Taraji P. Henson is lighter skinned as well. However, there's just a variety of them, which I think is really important because a lot of times in the past, as I said, the 1985 film, we tend to see more lighter skinned actresses in lead roles. However, in modern movies, we tend to fall into, if it's in the past, we use almost exclusively darker skinned actors and actresses. Whereas, as my ex-girlfriend pointed out, you know, Black people have been in the US for hundreds of years now. There are people who are of varying skin tones, even back in the 1800s, because they'd still been there for like hundreds of years. And so it's more realistic that there is such a variety of people in this town. And it was really nice to see this just celebration of like Black joy, even with the hardship. And I think that's what makes it work so well as a musical, is that they use the songs to punctuate moments of joy. And that's something that I liked more in this film, the 1985 film, is that they focused more on Celie's joy and her own agency. We get to know more about her as a person and as a character, more in this film than in the 85 film. She has, I'm saying more agency, just to mean like we see her perspective more, we see her inner thoughts more. Not because she necessarily speaks more or because she speaks up more earlier on, she doesn't. The timeline, the actual actions and scenes does follow the 85 film very well. There are some parts that weren't in that film. However, I think it helps better illustrate because also in this film, there is no narration, whereas in the 85 film, Celie is narrating the different time transitions and the different events, and they don't have that, so they have to add more scenes in to show the transition of events and time, which I didn't have an issue with. But a lot of those songs were there to showcase when Celie was truly happy, even within her horrible situation. And I liked that because it makes her feel like a more well-rounded and whole character. That she does have like thoughts and dreams and ambitions, aside from just being very submissive in her role in life. I think my favorite part of the entire film was Taraji P. Henson as Shug Avery. And here's why. So womanism, as I said, celebrates and is supposed to fight for women of color as well as queer women and queer women of color. However, a lot of times queer women, especially queer women of color, are still left out of these movements. And so very notably in the 1985 film, the sexual romantic relationship between Shug Avery and Celie is cut from the film. They get one kiss, but it's played off as like, oh, you know, they're just girls being girls, you know, just gal pals. And then they never come back to it. And Shug Avery gets married and they never come back to it. However, in the 2023 film, we really get to see more of Shug Avery as a empowered, like, Black queer woman who is also very in touch with her faith. And that's something that I like about this film too, is that it is overtly, I'm not going to say more religious, but religion is a big factor in The Color Purple. And it is more openly talked about and referenced in the 2023 film than it is in 1985. And I think I like that more because it really brings in like that Black liberation theology, that womanist theology that Alice Walker is trying to get across. And just the queerness of it, I think it really means a lot to people who have religious trauma, or queer people who maybe were raised with religion or raised in a religious household, who feel like they have to give up their faith, or that their faith is in contradictory to how they live. And so to see and hear Shug Avery give her monologue about how she lives her lifestyle and she's completely okay with who she is. However, you know, because she has a strained relationship with her dad, who's the priest, she doesn't feel like she's given up God. She's still very religious. She still believes in him. Everything she does is based off of, you know, her faith in him, and how she can be completely content with these two things. That she's, yes, a Black queer woman who, you know, sleeps with a bunch of men and a bunch of women, who drinks, who dances in heathenistic ways, you know, who sings about like pleasure and orgasms and sex, but who also is still very faithful to God, and is the first, you know, and is one of the first people to help Celie, you know, see that God is working and really change her perspective on God, on, you know, and her situation in life. And I think it also it does a better job of paralleling like Celie and Nettie's relationship to Celie and Avery and Shug Avery's relationship. Of, you know, Celie throughout the show is like questioning, throughout the movie is questioning, like, all these horrible things are happening to her. How can God be letting this happen? If God is all good, if God is always working for you, what is this? You know, like, how can these things happen? And, you know, with Nettie being like, oh, well, God doesn't make mistakes. You have to do this in order. And which is a very childish way of looking at it. And I think she's like 14 at the beginning of the musical, but the person who's always like encouraging her to believe in God and trust in God, versus with Shug Avery, where she's like, okay, no, you have to make a distinction, you know, like everything bad that's happened to you, it sounds like men did that to you, God did not do that to you. And seeing Celie slowly reevaluate and repair her relationship with God as she finds her own agency, and she finds empowerment within these other women in her community, like Sophia, Shug Avery, Mary Agnes, all of them. And that really showcases what womanism and womanist theology is about, is that you are finding community and strength and God in other women. You're finding it in the struggle. You're finding it in that community. And ultimately God will come to you in the form of these women and in these people. And that is his gift to you. And I think that this movie showcases that really well, but also without shoving it in your face. I hate when like Christianity or other religions are just really shoved in your face in media, or like the whole morality is like, well, Christianity is good and everything else is bad. But this really just is a celebratory story of Black culture, you know, womanist theology, of Black gospel music, which is what a lot of the chorus is, and just Black women, empowering Black women, celebrating Black queerness. It's really beautiful. The visuals are beautiful, the scenes are beautiful, and it blends that musicality and realness very well, because it is the way that songs are used are to punctuate important moments, especially moments of happiness. However, in the beginning, when we have the first song, the first few songs are done in large choruses, and they're done in such a way that they are there to introduce you to more of the surrounding town, to more of the setting, more so than the actual characters themselves. And I liked that. Going back to the beginning of this video, one of the things that Lin-Manuel Miranda said is that you need to use the opening song to like introduce your character, introduce their environment, what's important to them, and you know, their life and really set the stage and let people know what you can and cannot do. And so I think that the first few songs in The Color Purple really help to convey that, because, you know, we already see Celie and Nettie and we kind of get the relationship with their father. But when the townspeople start singing and dancing, or when Celie is outside of the store looking at her daughter and dreaming, they don't show dreams of fantasy, they show reality. You know, they show people, namely Black people, working on a railroad. They show prisons. They show the joy of church. They introduce you to the reality of the Black community in Georgia in the 1910s. Because while these are not specifically people that Celie knows, while these are not specifically experiences that Celie is going to have or has had, it is a reality that she still lives with and that everybody in this town and in this story is affected by, even if it's not with them specifically. And I like that because it really helps sets the stage more and expands the universe, despite the fact that it's basically only existing in this one small town and nowhere else. So now that I've gone over everything that I love about this musical and why you should go watch it, what did I not like? I think my only criticisms weren't a lot of the changes. I think my criticisms were the first part of the movie, up until Shug Avery gets there, seemed very disconnected and choppy. Like every scene was a little bit too fast. Like they were trying to get through the important background so they could like spend most of their time on the story, which compared to the 1985 film was not the case, and it was very noticeable. It felt like they were trying to just go over everything. And I think I understand why this film is PG-13. And as you know, since the 1980s, the way that we rate films is different. So you get away with a lot more back then being PG-13 or available to kids than it is now. And since this is a PG-13 film, they cannot show rape. They cannot show this kind of violence. And so a lot of the beginning has to be cut because that's where most of the explicit content is. And so it makes the pacing really weird, not because the scenes are rushed, but because the scenes seem cut off way too soon. And I really wish that they had just like drawn out each scene to its entirety so that you could really appreciate the severity and really like let it settle in, like how horrible of a situation Celie is in. And so I think for people who maybe have not seen the movie or read the book before, it can be hard to get into this world before the pacing kind of evens out. And it's because of that I wasn't as fond of Sophia's song Hell No, because it is a very powerful song and I think it's really great. However, we didn't set up why she was singing it as well as this part was in the movie. Like, I think things should have just like taken more of its time, and if they couldn't show everything, they should have at least given more time for those scenes and come up with something else to do, rather than just like having the scene as it was in the film but then cutting out those parts. Some criticisms that I've seen from other people is that they humanized Mr. A lot more in the 2023 film than they did in 1985. I don't know if this is more accurate to the book or not. I have not read the book, very sadly. I know I probably shouldn't be reviewing this if I haven't read the book, but I just haven't. However, I do know that both Alice Walker and her daughter Rachel Walker, who invented the word third wave feminism, so both very important people to feminist, womanist movements, had a lot to say about this film and were in the writing room and were in the producing chair and everything. And so I trusted a lot because they had like a hands-on help to shape this, which I think is good because it's not just going to stay in the context of the past, but it's also going to acknowledge a lot that has happened now and is happening now. And so I see this criticism of, you know, humanizing Mr., who, for those of you who don't know, is he basically bought Celie as his wife and routinely abused her, beat her, raped her, or just make her submissive because he just wanted a woman around the house who he could fuck, who could clean for him, who would cook for him, and who would take care of his kids for him, but he really didn't give a shit about her and was actively like harmful to her entire life. However, in the end, you know, after she does the whole I curse you, that everything that you did to me will be done to you, everything that you tried to succeed in will fail until you do right by me. And I like to say that in the movie, he does learn the consequences of his actions, but it's not given as much time as it is in the 2023 film. Here we see like the full extent, the same extent that we see in the non-musical film of him experiencing that karma. Everything's falling apart, you know, he's a drunk, his kids hate him, he has no money, the crops failed, everything's a mess. However, we pay more attention to him trying to do right, and so we get a lot of that inside of him bringing Nettie and Celie's kids back to the country, and we see him in the kind of, not explicitly, but like attempting to make things right by her and with her. And she does forgive him, maybe in a way people would say is too quickly. But I think it's also important that this is from a Black theological perspective, and, you know, Christianity, you want forgiveness and you should forgive. And we see Celie forgive, but not after like years upon years of growth, reflection. And she doesn't do so readily. She does it with hesitation. She does it, you know, on her own terms, which I like. But I can understand why people didn't like that, because I think a lot of people do just want that like very cathartic, you know, you suck, dude, and you're gonna be doomed to fail in everything you do, and that's what you get for like abusing and raping this girl, you know, for years. But I personally didn't hate it though. So take with that as you will. Another criticism I've seen is mainly from Black men, is that they don't like the way that Black men are portrayed in the movie. And I think that is why they end up humanizing Mister in this film, because they do also focus not only on like women's growth in community, you know, as a way of like escaping, enduring, empowering themselves against Black men, but also we focus a lot on the growth of Black men, in part because of the Black women that are around them, but also just like realizing that if you want these women around, you can't just expect them to be subservient to you. You have to treat them as equals and meet them where they're at and really try and care about them. And so we see this with, you know, with Mister, who's like, you have to do right by me or your ass is gonna die, basically. We see that with Harpo, it's Mister's son, you know, with Sophia, and basically he tries the whole like, oh, I'm gonna hit you, and once you left, I'm just gonna move on to someone younger and maybe prettier than you. But he ultimately still cares about her, and they work on things and they fix things, and he has this new respect for her. We also focus on how this idea of like masculinity and domination and control is a learned behavior. You know, Mister does a lot of what he does because his dad is there watching him and expect him to be a man and take control and everything. And Harpo does a lot of what he does because he sees what his dad does and what his dad expects him to do, even though he does rebel against his dad a lot more often than his dad against, you know, his dad. And we finally get all three generations of, I think the last name is Johnson, of Johnsons under one table. And that's when, you know, Celie finally breaks, and she's criticizing not just Mister, but they're criticizing the whole family. You know, like, all of you are terrible and you all need to be better and like break this generational trauma and break this like cycle of abuse and break this toxic masculinity. And could it have been portrayed better and more explicitly? Probably. However, that's not the main focus of the film. The main focus is the womanism. It is the community. It is Black feminine joy and community in the face of hardship, and acknowledging that that hardship comes from everywhere, not just from white people, not just from white men, but white women, from other Black women, from Black men, and these people closest to them, family as well as strangers and everything, from all ages. It's supposed to present that, but how in the face of all of this hardship from everywhere, you have each other, and that is ultimately what is divine. Now, what pisses me off about this film is not about the film. It's the fact that I paid $6 to go watch this movie, and I paid $15 to go watch the FNAF movie. Why? And I don't know if it's because, you know, they were in different theaters, in different like locations. I don't know if that's, but I would so have been down to pay so much more to see this movie, and I'm upset that I had to pay more to see the FNAF movie than to see this movie, because it is so much better. It is such a masterpiece. It's a really good story. It's really good acting and execution. It's not done just for the laughs. Like, it actually has really great meaning, and everybody clearly put their heart and soul into it, and we should be backing more projects like this that center Black stories, Black joy, Black pain, and, you know, celebrating Black queer women in this way. And it sucks that like they could possibly be making as much money, and I know they're not making as much money. I mean, Taraji P. Henson broke down over the fact that she's not getting paid enough for the absolutely incredible work that she's doing. Like, I have never seen a bad role from her. She always gives it 100%. She's phenomenal, and one of the best parts of every single picture that she's in. Like, she took this really daunting character, which she said she felt a lot of pressure to try and do, and absolutely just killed it and made her one of the best parts, well, best to me, one of the best parts of the entire movie. She made, you know, Shug Avery not just like an alcoholic kind of, you know, like loose woman, as they would say, but a really kind-hearted, faithful, fun, empowered woman that we are still, I'm not gonna say seeing today, but like we're still fighting to see today, you know, with Janelle Monáe's Age of Pleasure. I think Shug Avery would have loved that based off of this movie. Like, that's essentially what she was doing. And it boggles my mind that like this movie can come out and it's getting less, you know, media attention than these most likely going to be mediocre Mean Girls and Wonka. And that these actors who are putting their entire heart and soul doing such like back-breaking, tiring choreography, this just absolutely incredible belting gospel music, and they're not going to get paid as much as, once again, Wonka or Mean Girls. Oh, and I forgot to mention it earlier, but I just remembered one of my favorite things that it was done. That's why I love that Shug Avery and Celie were so intentionally queer, and that their moment was given a moment, and their relationship, even though it would, like, it just stayed, was that when we are introduced to Shug Avery, when she's just, you know, after the initial meeting with Celie, we can hear Ma Rainey's Prove It On Me playing in the background, and Ma Rainey, whose biopic was once again incredible by Viola Davis, who once again is an incredible Black actress who has never once faltered in a role, was a Black queer woman, and that whole song is about how she was almost arrested for her queerness, and then she wasn't, so she's just gonna keep doing it because once they charged her once, they can't charge her again because that's how the law works. And it felt so good that this queer religious woman, beautiful just woman, was just so confident within herself and given such a presence. Like, I think her as a character and her and Celie's relationship is something so important for Black queer women, just Black queer religious people, or just queer religious queer people in general. That she was given such a time, and even though she's supposed to be this like loose woman, it's clearly not for the male gaze the way she was filmed. It's very much like she is in charge of herself. And I appreciated, I loved it so much. I cannot stress to you how much you need to go and see this movie. So that's all for today. That's all for probably the next 2 months or so. 4 months? Next 4 months. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave the comment below. I love this movie so much. I think the next movie I'm going to go see is definitely the Bob Marley movie. Bob Marley means a lot to me. And it looked so good, and I'm so excited to see it. So if you saw The Color Purple, you think I missed anything, you think I was wrong, please comment below. I love a discussion. I'd love to talk about this more. It's literally the only thing that's been on my mind for the past like day now since I saw it yesterday. So yeah, with that being said, have a happy new year. So long and thanks for all the fish. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.